So Love Lies Bleeding. So Love Lies Bleeding is A24's newest weird gem, and we have Kristen Stewart. She's playing this down on her luck gym manager, and she falls for this girl who's trying to be a bodybuilder, Katie O'Brien, who comes to visit her gym while she's in town. And when they're in town, Katie O'Brien's character kind of explains to her that she's trying to become like a world-class bodybuilder, and so begins this love dynamic between the two of them. And immediately starting off, this movie has A24 written all over it, and if you've ever seen movies of the genre, they're becoming pretty well known at this time. You'll know exactly what I mean by that. The entire movie has this really like grimy 80s look, and that's the first thing I really liked about this movie. I thought this movie was going for an 80s vibe, and I think it pretty much nailed it. I think the music and the cinematography really makes you feel like you're in the 80s, as opposed to a lot of movies that kind of go for the 80s look, but they don't really know what it was like, so they're just playing off of the tropes of what the 80s were like. On top of the two main actresses, the movie also has Ed Harris in it as kind of like the third main character, and he's got to have an honorable mention of the worst hairdo I've ever seen in a movie. So the interesting thing about this movie is it really does break down into like two movies as it progresses. You kind of have like half of the movie that's like a lesbian romantic side of the movie. It's just like a typical love tale between the two. The second half is this really like grindhousey, grimy action thriller, and I kind of feel like the combination somehow worked. So the main dilemma basically taking place is while you're having the love interest go on, you have Katie O'Brien's character working for Ed Harris, who's kind of like a slimy boss. And something I thought this movie does well right off the bat, so I feel like they do a pretty good job at just kind of letting you know that everyone in this movie is kind of a piece of shit in their own right. So there's a scene in this movie where Katie O'Brien's character, the big bodybuilder, basically gets into a fight with Dave Franco's character, ends up killing him. And because of this, the main feud of the movie is started, in which Ed Harris's character and all of like the crime family and stuff is after these two. So you have this little romance on the run. And getting into the character development in this movie, I definitely think the acting and like the character development in this movie is definitely the movie's strongest suit. I'm not really a big Kristen Stewart fan. I haven't seen like a ton of her work. I know she's in obscure projects, but I think she's really damn good in this movie. Because what she has to do in this movie is manage being kind of this like weird junky gym manager who's kind of down on her luck, and also sell you on the love interest she has to Katie O'Brien's character. And I feel like they really do a good job of juggling that. But who really steals the show, as I've mentioned there a bunch, is Katie O'Brien playing the bodybuilder. I feel like she's absolutely phenomenal in this role. She's also asked to do a lot, in which she's playing the love interest of Kristen Stewart, obviously, but she's playing this like world-renowned bodybuilder, so she has this absolutely amazing physique going on. And she also has this dynamic going on where her and Kristen Stewart kind of start experimenting with steroids so that she can take on the bodybuilding competition easier. And I really like the way they highlighted this, especially in the trailer, how they have her really like hulking out and like her muscles are bulging beyond like, normal limitations, just to kind of highlight the effects of the steroids. And given that it's an A24 movie, obviously there's other weird, like artsy choices about how they're going to do stuff in the movie, but I thought that one was probably the biggest takeaway for something I liked. And going back, on top of the fact that Ed Harris has the worst hairdo in the history of movies in this movie, I think he's pretty good in the role, but I also like him in every role. He plays this weird, like insect eating crime boss, and he's just kind of like, he's really unsettling when he's on the screen. He just feels like a really grimy, dark dude. They don't really show you as much as it just kind of gives you the feel of it when you're watching him. And do not be fooled. This movie is heavy, heavy, heavy on the lesbian sex scenes. To the point, do not take your kids. Do not go here on a date night. There's just a lot of scenes, probably about 5 to 10 scenes in general. It's got to have composed 15 minutes of film time that you just have a couple making out. And it didn't really bother me, but it definitely will bother some people. There's going to be some people that are just completely turned off by this movie and how artsy it's kind of going for, but it really didn't affect me. But that's not to say that it's really like tacky or it's preachy or anything, in my opinion. Like I said in the review earlier this year for a movie Drive-Away Dolls, I thought that movie was just woke and like terrible for the sake of wokeness. The characters added nothing. In this movie, I was actually sold on the romance. I actually didn't mind the fact that Kristen Stewart and her were like dating the way they portrayed it. And because of that, I actually think you care about the characters in this movie, which is a good thing. And I think that's good writing. I think whenever you can get the audience to kind of be engaged, believe in the romance, the acting's good, always a plus for me. And when you do kind of get into the story, obviously no spoilers. Like I said, there's like some fight scenes and things like that. This movie gets dark. It goes 0 to 100 real quick. So much so, in fact, that there's some like practical effects in this movie, like kills and like gore and stuff that is very, very hard to watch. There's like one scene that's very memorable. It's like Saw-esque how graphic it is. And as the story moves along, obviously, as I said, you have the characters balancing the fact that they have the romance, the girl's trying to get to her bodybuilding competition, they're being hunted by the assassins and the crime boss. So you have a bunch of juggling parts, all done A24 style. But when you do get to the end, especially if you've already seen this movie, you'll know what I'm talking about. This movie has a very, very polarizing end, in my opinion. Whereas I referenced, if you've ever seen an A24 movie, this movie goes full A24 at the end, to the point it's like, here we go again, A24. It's like, did she really just do that? Did they really just put that in the screen? Is that like a vision that literally happened? And since I've seen a lot of A24 movies, it didn't really bother me. I still enjoyed it, but there's going to be some people that will maybe be on board until the ending and they're just going to throw their popcorn and say, absolute trash the moment the scene happened. So if you have seen it, comment down below, let me know, and I would really like to know what you thought of the ending. But overall, if I had to say, I thought this movie was actually a pretty good time. It's not really in my wheelhouse for genres I see a lot of. I just heard a lot of good things about it, so I figured I'd check it out. But I definitely recommend the movie if you're a fan of A24 movies. But yeah, if you're a fan of the 80s and you like synth music, sweaty bodybuilders all over the screen, a dark, grimy look, you'll probably like this movie, have a good time with it. Would I have preferred the ending to be different? Probably, but I kind of get what they're going for metaphorically. It's A24. You know when you see the logo pop across the screen, what you're getting at this point. But overall, I did enjoy this movie. I would recommend this movie personally. I probably won't ever rewatch this movie like a lot of A24 movies, but definitely worth a watch once. It went by fast. So have you seen this movie? If you have, comment down below. Let me know what you thought of it. Did you think the ending was polarizing? Please don't spoil it if you do in the comments. But what's your favorite A24 movie if you haven't seen this one? If you liked what you see here and you want to see more videos, subscribe. It would help the channel. I'm going to keep making more videos. Kind of do a lot of horror stuff, but I'm also doing a lot of modern stuff, so there's going to be a good variety. Other than that, I'm going to put a link to a playlist up here to the other 2024 movies I've seen. Other than that, guys, take care, stay safe.